All right. How y'all doing? How you doing? I just want to make sure that the volume is good. And I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. So just drop a yes, you can hear. Just want to make
That
sure that my
the
volume
volume
is
is
good.
good.
All right. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the power of vulnerability and authenticity. And this is like one of the number one biggest things that people have an issue with. But this is the ultimate thing that people have to understand that is needed, where you begin to walk in your purpose. And this is also like when you know yourself. So and so it's trying to find your strength in the power of vulnerability and authenticity. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Shawn Wyatt. I'm a licensed therapist and a transformational coach, and I am the CEO of the Conversation Spot. The thing that I do is I help people heal. I help unpack trauma. One of the things that I like to focus is on dealing with the root issues. And so I'm a trauma informed therapist, and I usually go back to childhood to just help people unpack and unprocess some things, even, in their adult years, and help them to bridge the gap and help them just find language to some of the things that they're dealing with. So let's get into it, guys. So when you think about vulnerability, what comes to mind? So you can just drop in the chat, what comes to mind when you think about being vulnerable, when you think about what it means to be vulnerable. Okay. So when you think about the word vulnerability, it can be scary, right? It's kind of like close to, okay, being vulnerable, being open, being transparent. And one of the things with when it comes to being vulnerable is right, letting those walls down and just being open. And yeah, so I see you guys in the chat. So being open, being vulnerable, but sometimes it can feel like being exposed, right? It's like, ugh, is you start to feel all these things on the inside, and you're like struggling with sometimes being vulnerable. And there's multiple reasons why. It can be because in your family you weren't taught to be open, be vulnerable, to talk about things, have uncomfortable conversations. A lot of times it can be associated sometimes to guilt, shame, when it comes to like doing that. Um, a lot of different things. And so it's I want you to think about maybe in past times when it was hard for you to be vulnerable and why. Sometimes there's also like a trust factor, especially when it comes to people, right? Because it's like you're letting people in your space, you're letting people in like your private place, and you just want to kind of just think about like, okay, what's going on? Why do I even want to, why should I share this? It's kind of like the signals that goes off in your mind, in your brain, and you're like, okay, what's going on, right? Like, I don't know if I can trust this person. I don't know if I can be honest. I don't even know if I can be myself. And so sometimes that's why it's like a trust thing, and that's why you feel like naked and exposed when it comes to that. So I want to give you guys some definitions in what it actually means to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable, it means the willingness to expose. So when you say, okay, I feel naked, exposed, well, that comes along with it. You're gonna have to be open. You're gonna have to expose. You're gonna have to speak on your true emotions, how you feel, your thoughts, your experience, all of that. Even when it risks you being open and vulnerable with your most um sensitive things, your most vulnerable things that are very private for you, meaning that for me to even open up about this, like, it's going to take a lot, but that's the risk that you take, right? And so other people may not really understand your vulnerability, or some people may be even uncomfortable. That's the thing with the way that you're being open. So just think about some time when someone kind of like shared all of the things that they've been through. They're shared most like very sensitive details, and they've shared, the things that they went through. And just think about your response today. You're like, wow, oh my gosh. But it was just something that you saw probably within that person, just to be able to just share their truth, to just share what they're kind of like going through, and just to be able to express all of those things. Another thing why it's so important to be vulnerable is because you have to be honest about your fears, your failures, and your insecurities. A lot of times people don't want to be honest about that. A lot of time it's like an internal dialogue that's going on. It's like, these things, you feel these things. They're probably also in the subconscious, but when you are vulnerable, you get to this place where you're just more open, right? And so it involves an emotional risk taking, meaning that I am taking a risk. I am putting my emotions out there, and I'm taking a risk because I know that this is going to leave me vulnerable. This is going to leave me exposed, and I have to be willing to do that. And also, this means letting the walls down, letting go of all defenses, because some people can be, judgmental towards it, but your truth is your truth, right? And this also means letting go of the persona and the ego, or the self-defense mechanisms that you put into place to protect yourself. So we're going to get a little bit more into that. So what does it mean to be authentic? Okay. When you think about my authentic self, right? We hear that on social media a lot when people says, okay, I just want to be, my most authentic self. I'm in my healing seasons, where you hear people say, I'm in my soft girl era, right? That means like the soft feminism part that they're taking on about themselves, where they just want to be, free. They just want to be themselves. But being your authentic self, by definition, it means living in alignment with your true self, your values, your beliefs, your emotions, and identity. So your authenticity is tied to your identity. And if you're still confused about your identity, it's hard for you to live in that authenticity. It's hard for you to be authentic with others because you're still on guard. You're not as transparent. You are showing up a certain way, right? Think about times when you just couldn't be your full self, right? For whatever reason. And sometimes you may have to show up a certain way. This can happen in the workplace. This can happen even in relationships with people. This can happen in organizations. This can happen in any setting where you do not feel completely comfortable for whatever reason why. And so you got to deal with that inferiority. You got to deal with that imposter syndrome. You got to deal with all of those things where you mask your true self. Sometimes even perfectionism can come into play because you are showing up a certain way, and there's so much pressure to be and to perform where you're not living in your true identity. So being authentic means I'm going to take off all of those things what people have, said about me, all of those things maybe that I've even put on myself, the expectation that people may have of me, the expectation that I have of myself, where I'm holding myself maybe even to unrealistic expectations. And you're taking that off. You're taking that weight off. You're taking the mask off, and you're just being yourself. Sometimes you just have to breathe. I talk to people on numerous occasions, day to day, when it just takes so much to even be in certain settings because they're having to be a certain way. And so it's like as soon as they get home, it's like, whoo, right? The hat comes off, the veil comes off, the mask comes off. And then their true selves at home. And so they sometimes put on this facade, they put on this front, or it just takes so much because people are pulling so much out of you and you are not showing up in your true form. So what is the relationship between being vulnerable and being authentic? Well, being vulnerable is actually a gateway to being authentic. Why? Because you have to start being truthful. You have to start letting the walls down. You have to start being honest about your flaws, your weakness, about, some of the things that you're dealing with, even your past, your trauma, all of the things, that makes you, insecurities, your failures, your fears, all of those things have to be talked about. And so if you have a problem with talking, well, this is going to have to be something that you work on. Why? Because you have to talk, you have to share, you have to be open. A lot of times I, talk to people, and one of the things that I hear people say is like, I don't like people. I used to be that person. I used to be like, oh, like it was just so much for me to get energy and to talk to people. I had walls up for a lot of different reasons that I was unaware of, until I just have to start having some honest conversations about some things, and I had to start just unpacking some things. And so this is just what the process is when it comes to being your authentic self. So because I've, just personally, went through some things, I'm able to be on this live today and, and not be worried about, certain things. Also, when you are vulnerable and you are being more authentic, you start to feel empowered. You start to do those things that maybe you were afraid to do at one point, things that you were restricted of, things that you just had a lot of anxiety about, but then you begin to step out and you begin to be purposeful. Okay. So these are some myths about what it means to be vulnerable. When people think about vulnerability, they think that it's a sign of weakness. Like, oh man, like I don't want to be open. I don't want to share too much. Like, if I'm letting somebody know that I'm sad today, if I'm letting somebody know I deal with depression, if I let somebody know, how I'm really feeling, they're going to think that I'm weak. Okay. And I want to let you know that being vulnerable, even if you have to show emotions, is actually a sign of strength, because it means that it took a lot for you just to be honest about how you really feel. So it's going to take courage when you do this. Okay. Another myth is you have to have it all together to be authentic. That is a lie. When people are like, oh, I'm healed and whole. Well, that's a process to even getting to whole. Healing takes time. It's a journey. It's not a race. It takes time. So you do not have to have it all together, because as you are coming into your identity, one of the things that you're going to do is that you're going to change, right? You're going to start to transform. You're going to start to grow. You're going to start to be better and better, and you're going to evolve even more. So you do not have to have it all together to be authentic. Another myth it means when you're vulnerable that people believe is that I'm oversharing. Like we know people that maybe they just share, they're just an open book. And whatever you want to ask them, they're just going to be honest about it, because they have nothing to hide. They have nothing to be shameful about. And so it's like when you get to that point where you're just an open book and you're okay with letting people know like the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's when you know that you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Another myth is that people will just automatically judge you. A lot of times you may not know that when you're vulnerable, that it may help someone. So you may have some people that may look at you or that may judge you. However, what about all of those other people that you're helping, where they say, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with the same thing, or thank you for sharing that with me, because that's helpful to my situation. So thank you for your vulnerability. A lot of times it takes a lot for someone to just share the most, critical intimate details about some things. And I always thank people for just thank you for your vulnerability, first of all, right? Because you did not have to share that. And like as a therapist, you know that I hear a lot of intimate details, a lot of sensitive things, a lot of times where I'm the first person that they have told things to, and they haven't shared this, with other people, even the people that's close to them. And so I always just like to thank people just for being vulnerable and taking the time to be courageous in that moment. And so, okay, don't worry about judgment. All people are not judging. A lot of times people love when you're vulnerable because it shows that you're open. It shows that you're willing to not have it all together. Another myth is being vulnerable is I'm trying to see which one I want to say because there was a couple of them, but I don't want to go through all of them. But the other myth, I think this is a good one, is that being vulnerable only involves negative emotions. That is not the case. You can share a positive experience as well. It doesn't have to be like doom and gloom and like, oh my gosh, like so like traumatic. Being vulnerable can be like some positive emotions and positive experiences, and that can help somebody else. Okay. So being authentic and being vulnerable, it can be very challenging, especially when you want to, tap into those emotional things. And so, when you really, really get into it, what happens is that people really don't want to, be vulnerable, and be authentic. Why? Because there's a fear of rejection that is there. Yes, I said it. There's a fear of rejection, not being accepted. And so the reason why you're afraid to be vulnerable can be that you're afraid to be rejected. Because it's like if I share what I'm really dealing with, what I'm really going through, how would you respond to that? How would you feel? Okay. And it shows that I'm not perfect, right? It takes away from this image and this persona that you have, that you made, and you got to like take it off. Okay. There's some shame and some insecurity. Shame, it has a powerful role in preventing people from being vulnerable. So if this is you, then you need to really deal with the fact that there's no shame, right? I shouldn't be guilty about my experiences and what I went through. And just know that it's going to be very powerful when you begin to break shame and that guilt. A lot of times I just talked about it, right? Past hurt and trauma, right, is very sensitive, and we know that sharing those details can be, really impactful. This is a big one. A fear of losing control. If I'm vulnerable, then I lose control. So when we say like naked and exposed, when we're talking about, vulnerability, like that's a sense of losing control. And so for my people that's always trying to, be in control because everything else is out of control, or when anxiety intensifies, right? You try to grab onto something and you just want control over it. Yeah, you gotta be okay with losing that sense of control. Another thing is unrealistic expectations and perfection. Being authentic, it involves exposing your flaws. I cannot say that enough, okay? Like you got to be okay with dealing with the fact that you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and that you're a flawed individual, and you're not going to have it all right. You're not going to have it all together. Another one is a fear of disappointing others. A fear of disappointing others. being authentic, um when you are your true form, the most open true form of yourself, you begin to set boundaries with people. And because you go and you tap into like your identity, like you know who you are, and you're more like free and you're more open. But a lot of people, it's hard for them to set boundaries with things and with people. Another one, and this is the last thing before I kind of go into some other things, is there's a lack of emotional awareness. Some people struggle with being vulnerable because they have no emotional awareness. They're not emotionally available, and it's hard for them to be open and transparent. Those are my people that, we hear the word, narcissistic people. We hear when people are emotionally unavailable, and it's because, it can be a couple of things. They weren't taught to be emotional, meaning that, they weren't taught to, just be open with their emotions. Trauma situations happens where you begin to, put on this tough, hard exterior, and there's a numbness about yourself. And so when you begin to experience things, it's kind of like this coldness about yourself, or you seem to like be unbothered with things. And so then there's sensitivity decreases to things as well when people tell you things. So like, for example, when it's a reason why you should cry, you're not crying. When it's a situation that you should be sad, you're not sad. You're not feeling those normal emotions. Okay. So one of the things that I also want y'all to know is how can you start to be more vulnerable? Okay. How can you start to be more vulnerable? How can you start to be more vulnerable? Well, when I just was talking about the feelings and the emotions and the self-awareness, one of the things you're going to have to do is actually be self-aware. You're going to have to be self-aware. Self-awareness means I'm looking inwards, I'm looking at myself, and I'm being aware of my issues, my flaws, the things that are going on, the things that I'm dealing with. You know how like you tell somebody something and they're like, no, that ain't me. Or you try to give them some advice about, hey, well, maybe, do you think maybe you're this way? Or do you think that this is going on? And it's like going right over their head. Some people just lack, self-awareness. Like they will not know that, okay, they're dealing with some things, or they're the cause of something, and they're not looking at themselves. Some of those people even will point fingers. Okay. So I'm going back and looking at some comments. Yeah, it is like people pleasing. A lot of times why we don't want to be authentic is because of the people pleasing. And so when you're self-aware, right, you'll start to understand that, okay, these are some characteristics that I have that keeps me from being vulnerable. Okay. I do things just to keep other people happy. I hide my emotions and I keep my emotions in because it protects other people. Right. And so, I can't let people really know how I feel, because if I share with them, this is what it will mean for them. And so you are deciding how other people will feel and respond. Hope that makes sense. Yes. All of that. Self-denial, defensive. And so another thing is identify where you are wearing masks. This is how you're going to start to become more vulnerable, is identifying why you're even wearing a mask, identifying in what areas do you wear a mask, right? So just say, With my sibling, hey, I can be open. With my significant other, it's kind of like I'm closed up, or it may be vice versa. With my significant other, oh, I'm more open, right? I'm able to be all of me, but then with friends and family, I'm like closed off. So you got to identify where you are wearing the mask. Why? Because people often hide their true selves behind masks. You're camouflaging, right? Like you're doing things just to fit in. And so if I can admit and be vulnerable in this moment, one of the things that I used to do is I used to only show parts of myself to different groups of people that I felt like who I can be. So I go by Shawn, but I have my full name. And so I would say, Shawn is the person that can show up right in these professional settings, right? But my true name and my nickname, right? That's the person that will show up all these other places. So I felt like I just had to be certain things for certain people. Also, when I was like my loud, goofy self, in one relationship, it was looked at bad. This person would say certain things. This person will, put me down because, I spoke loud, and they were like, why are you talking so loud? I'm like, I don't know, I'm from the country, I talk loud. So I had to be okay with that. But what happened was that began to close me up, because then I started to fall back. And what I used to say is that I would come out and play. I would unzip when I felt like it was safe, and I let my guards down. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can be myself. Maybe I can let, somebody in. And so at the moment that something would happen and that person would like judge me, for me being my true self, I would close her back up, and I would like zip her back up, and I would be quiet, and I would just, be I would just conform to the person that, you can handle and you can deal with. So that was a form of, me people pleasing. That was a form of me conforming to other people's views about me, until I had to break free from that. And I had to identify, no, you're the problem, because why would I be okay with someone not liking all of me? So you shouldn't deal with people that does not like all of you and does not respect all of you, because it's like, if I can only show up to you my perfect self, how are you going to handle my true self that's emotional, might be a little crazy, I may be moody from time to time, right? But that doesn't define all of me. Also, my trauma doesn't define me. And so when we hide that, though, from people, and we only show up one version, the flip side of that is that we give people a misconception about ourselves. And so at the moment when you can no longer hide anymore, your true self comes out, and that person is like taken back. They're like, whoa. And so you're thinking, see, I can't be honest with you. See, I can't be vulnerable. See, this is what happens. But no, you were only always showing up your perfect self. And so this person is a little bit surprised. They didn't got hit with the true you. And not saying that that's not okay and that won't happen sometimes, but how we even show up in the beginning matters. It does. That's just like, I know somebody can identify here where, this person, it seemed like they had it all together, right? And then, 3 months, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, you're like, oh, did I get catfish? Who are you? Because you start to really see the person behind the mask. And it can only be hidden for so long. Okay? So I want you to reflect on situations where you were pressured to conform, and also suppress your emotions, because that is one of the key factors on, if I always have to suppress how I feel, that means you are showing up with a mask. You're not being yourself. You're not being vulnerable. You're not being authentic. Okay? So another thing that you can start doing is to practice honest communication. What does honest communication looks like? Hey, um, I was feeling insecure about that. I started to compare myself in that moment. And this is what I was dealing with. I don't know why I felt a little jealousy, but this is what happened. Um, this, when I showed up to this event, I felt inferior. I felt, small being in the room. Hey, this makes me feel rejected. I'm dealing with rejection. So this is what honest communication is. So just being honest about where you're at and what you're dealing with. Um that's the biggest thing, right? Because one of the things is start being okay with having these conversations. And it's like, like when you want to say something, it's on the tip of your tongue, but you just like, oh, I'm just not gonna say nothing. I'm just gonna keep it to myself. Another thing, and I'm gonna just insert this here, is that my strong people, the strong friends, the strong family member, the ones who are, the leaders in their communities and their families and your friendships. It's hard for you to even be vulnerable and be honest with how you feel. Why? Because you're being there for everybody else. And so maybe when you're going through it, or when you are going through something, it's like you have to feel like you can't say anything, and you just can't be honest about your feelings, because it's like, well, who gonna be there for me, right? But again, you are deciding for those people, and you're not allowing people to show up for you, or at least those people who should show up for you. And so that is going to segue me into this other one, is start talking to people who are safe for you. Meaning that if you can't start to be open with people who you already don't trust, who you already know who don't have your best interests at heart. So you got to start having these conversations with people who also are going to hold you accountable, people that love you, people that care for you, people that just want to see you do well. So you got to start with having these, communications, these open, honest communication with people that you trust, okay? Because you want to be safe. And so as long as you feel safe, this is what is called emotional safety. You need emotional safety. Okay? So I want you to remember that even when you're going into your conversations, when like you're going to start trying some of these things and you want to start being more open, what you tell the person that you're starting to share this with is, I need emotional safety. And so this may mean listening, not being judgmental, just maybe being there for me, being understanding, being supportive. Another thing is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It is going to be very discomforting when you begin to share things. You like, man, and like it'd be hard to get it out, when you're being vulnerable, and when like when you're dealing with these. But the more you start doing it, I promise you, the easier it will become. So that's what you got to just start doing. You got to just be okay with being uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie and say that, oh, it's gonna be easy and you're just gonna just go right and do it. No, it's gonna be very uncomfortable at first. But I want you to push through it. I want you to navigate through all of those emotions. I want you to breathe through it, live in the moment, and just start and go and just be, because you have to do this. You have to start to be okay with having uncomfortable conversations. When you start to be better about having uncomfortable conversations, you'll also get better at dealing with conflict and confrontation. People that don't know how to have uncomfortable conversations, they I usually see them dealing with passivity. They're passive and passive aggressiveness. Or you'll go to the extreme and be very aggressive, and there's no balance with the emotions, and you kind of getting it out. Okay. Another thing is start to actually embrace all of your flaws, embrace your imperfectionisms about yourself, and let go of perfectionism. So you want to embrace all of your flaws. Yes, you're right on time. You embrace every imperfection. You just got to look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. I have this going on. Yeah, I'm working on that. Yes, this is my issue. But hey, I'm gonna be better, right? And let go of being perfect. One of the main things that I had to do was let go of perfectionism. I still have these, high standards that I have, where I just want to like do well, and I can overperform, but I'm okay with not being perfect. My husband might differ. He just, he may have something different to say, but you have to let go of being, perfect. I remember just sitting with myself and dealing with, I just kept on wanting to just go to like the next big thing, the next huge thing, and have these accolades. And I just had to stop and say, why? Yeah, I had to be okay with where I'm at, because I wasn't living in the moment where I was at. And I was putting these high expectations on myself, these high standards. And I'm like, well, I gotta be, I just felt this pressure. Nobody put the pressure on me. Nobody. I put the pressure on myself. And so I had to let go of these unrealistic expectations. And I have to just give myself, some breathing room. I just have to let myself just be okay. And sometimes I still have to, practice that daily. I have to practice that all the time. When I start getting antsy or anxious, or I start wanting things to be a certain way, I have to say, it's okay. It's okay. Yes, we got to learn the difference between excellence and perfectionism. Yes, we want to do things in excellency, right? We ain't got to be perfect. When you're trying to be perfect, you'll start having some thoughts. You'll start having these internal thoughts. Oh, I got to do this. You feel all this pressure. You start feeling overwhelmed. Then you'll start talking yourself out of something. That's how you know it's perfectionism. Okay. Another one is accept that not everyone will approve of you. This is the moment where you may have to part ways with those people who are not good for you, those people, those friends, maybe even some family relationships that no longer serve you. That is no longer I've heard all kinds of stories where, people, friends have, done things to them. We have friends that they'll turn on us, or friends that we keep giving them a chance, or even relationships, with people. You got to understand like your worth, and everybody just want to approve of you. Everybody want to like you. You got to be okay with that. Everybody is not going to like me, and I'm not for everybody. If you're trying to be all things for everybody and all people, then yes, you're dealing with identity issues. You just gotta, and then I'll say this: you shouldn't just say, well, I'm the way that I am. I ain't gonna worry about nobody, and I don't care if nobody don't like me. No, I'm not saying that. because that keeps us from actually going out and forming genuine, true relationships with people. What I'm saying is that those people who don't want to meet you where you're at and they're not supportive of you, or they can't accept the true you, the most vulnerable, authentic you, baby, it might be time to go ahead and go our separate ways. Okay? You do not have to keep people around for your comfort. You don't have to keep people around for their comfort. Some people will benefit from you being a yes person. The moment you say no, they stop talking to you. They're not texting you back. They're ignoring you. You're going on goals. But the moment you giving it in, doing everything that they want you to do, right? They're there. So that's why I talked a little bit about a boundary. Once you start identifying this and being okay with who you are, what's going to happen is that you're going to draw a line, and you are going to draw a boundary, and you are going to not allow you're not going to allow just anybody to be in your life anymore. A lot of times we don't even want to set the bound. Why don't you want to set the boundary? Oh, I don't want to make them feel bad. I don't want to hurt their feelings. What are they going to say? Well, you're still being a yes person, because that means you're overly considerate of them and you're not considerate of yourself. So, yes, this means putting yourself first. You got to put yourself first. You have to put yourself first, and you have to make yourself a priority. Boundaries is not, for other people. It's for you, to protect you, to keep you safe, to keep you from, certain feelings, to keep you from people hurting you. And if they don't respect your boundaries, then they just don't respect you. Some people like, oop, ouch. Okay. Yes. And so you just got to be okay. I'm not for everybody, and everybody is not for me. You no longer have to keep conforming to people's standard and their liking just to be liked and accepted. Um, One of the things I tell people, my ladies in my counseling session, when they're kind of like trying to, they're tired of dating, just anybody, and this can be for men too, right? You gotta know that who you are and your self-worth. Like, you can't be trying to be, husband and wife, and you just a girlfriend or the boyfriend. Like, you just put it all out there. I'm cooking, and now I'm doing this, and you like just giving everything, like out. Like, no, you gotta save some of that, right? Because you didn't gave everything out. You didn't poured everything out. That's going back to people pleasing, wanting to be accepted, dealing with rejection, and also abandonment issues. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. Okay. But okay, so going back. Another thing is that you're going to have to do is engage in self-compassion. Self-compassion, giving yourself grace, being compassionate about yourself and your flaws and where you're at, understanding, when you're struggling with things, and that you're not going to do everything right. You're not going to get it all right all the time. Understanding that you may have some setbacks. Okay. You have to practice being kind to yourself. If your mind is telling you negative things about yourself, if there's low self-worth, you have to understand and practice self-compassion, being kind to yourself. You can't expect other people to be kind to you when you're not even doing that for yourself. You got to love yourself. Okay? And in that, avoid like self-criticism all the time, putting yourself down. So if you're putting yourself down, you're not practicing self-compassion and you're not practicing kindness to yourself. This means giving yourself, grace. So um now, from all the things, right, you've been hearing, I hope that this has been helpful for you. But I want to make sure that I, talk about, the resiliency and finding strength in all of this, knowing that the way that you've identified strength does not mean being strong, having it all together. It actually means the opposite. So you thought that being strong means I gotta do this. Hey, I gotta be there for my family. What they gonna do without me? Oh, I can't show any signs of weakness. Hey, I'm grieving. If I grieve, then what, I gotta be strong for other people. I can't grieve. All of these different types of things. So you have to know that no, it's strength. It's strength when you're vulnerable, is strength because it leads to you being your true self. Okay. Your true self. Another thing is that it's going to lead you to overall personal growth in yourself. Like you got to grow. Like, do you want to stay a baby forever? Do you want to be filled with all of these internal emotions, and your emotions are everywhere and there is no real balance? Not showing emotions is not good. Being overly emotional is not good. That's not good at all. When you start to do this, you're going to start learning that because I'm being vulnerable now, that now I can start to have more deep, authentic connections with people. This will move you away from having surface level connections and friendships and move you into more deeper connections with somebody where we are connecting. They know me. I understand them. I just have now that safe place where I can just share and I can just be. How does it feel when you have nowhere to go? Nobody to be vulnerable with. And it's like, I'm dealing with this all by myself. And that's not good because that means you answering yourself. You're giving yourself advice. Then you need somebody. You need to be able to unload, to be open, and just to work through those things. Okay. So I want you to practice being more emotionally aware of your own feelings. I want you to begin to communicate openly with people, the good, bad, and the ugly. I want you to begin to set boundaries, okay? Healthy boundaries, okay? And I want you to take on the phrase that vulnerability is power. I want everybody to drop that in the chat. Vulnerability is power. Vulnerability is power. Because when you begin to tap into it, you understand that it's true strength and that it empowers you and it helps you to live fully. It helps you to live openly, authentically, and freely and be your true self. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. Did anybody have any questions? Was this helpful for anybody? I want to hear what you guys think. Okay. Okay, so I'm glad that it was helpful for you guys. Okay, I hear somebody saying confirmation for me. Great information. Okay, so I want you to walk around, saying vulnerability is power. Sometimes you gotta tell people, get like me. Okay, you're not vulnerable. Why you not vulnerable? What's going on? What you're dealing with. And no longer will you hide, no longer will you conform, no longer will you just hold back. When you hold back, you're not being free. You're not just being yourself, like you stuck up, like you tight. You be, you want control on everything. So I'm glad that this was helpful for you guys. I will see you guys with our next topic. I'm going to release that soon. So just, stay tuned. We're going to be doing this every 2 weeks. So bi-weekly at the same time, we're going to have these late night conversations. I'm going to start bringing on guests. I'm probably even bring up some people, but yes, I'm glad that you guys like this topic. So I want you guys to just stay tuned for more, and I can't wait to chat with you again. Bye bye.